Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife and empowers you to live a more vibrant second half. If you find us on YouTube today, please don't forget to ring that bell so you don't miss any more of these conversations. And if you're on a podcast platform, please subscribe, rate, and share. Today, we're going to be talking about creativity and perimenopause. My guest today believes that perimenopause is not just about hormones, that there's so much more to this season. She believes that this is the most creative crucible of our lives. It's the most creative transformation of our lives. My guest's name is Kelly Herrick. She's an artist and she is the founder of Rebloom School. Kelly, thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Gina. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, we had some time change challenges. I'm in California and Kelly is in England, but we got it together. And I'm so excited to share her and her mindset and her passion around art. So Kelly, would you give us a little bit of an insight why you see art and perimenopause and menopause as a perfect pairing? I'm interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, well, it's first of all, it has real similarities between the vibe and the flow and the kind of process, the inner process of making and creating. I think as we're going through in perimenopause and menopause, because we are, in a sense, recreating ourselves. So I really feel that we've been through so many big biological changes as women, but there's always someone else at the end. So if you think about puberty and adolescence, we're becoming sexually active, ready for partners and, to make babies and procreate. And then when we go through the other big transformation that some of us have had of labor and having children, that's to become a mother and your children at the end of that process. And then you get to perimenopause and menopause, and we go through this huge physiological, emotional, mental transformation. But it's just us at the other side. And I think that's amazing and so powerful. And I just want to help spread that kind of more optimistic and powerful message amongst so many of the other challenges that we have as sort of perimenopausing and menopausing women.
Mm-hmm. I so agree with you. It's such a lovely, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the process itself is not necessarily lovely, but but who we become and the process of it, it's such a lovely time
It's a
of life.
metamorphosis.
Yes, it
It's a
is.
metamorphosis.
Yes. You can feel it. Like it's so obvious. And when we are more aware of our own transformation, right? Instead of, because I feel
Yeah.
like we look at it very clinically, like, oh, this is menopause and I just can't wait to get through to the other side. But there's so much in it, is what I hear you saying.
Oh gosh, yeah. And I mean, so many amazing people out there, and the whole world has kind of opened up to menopause, I've seen anyway, over this last sort of year or so. And there's so much more conversation around it. And it's brilliant because women are kind of getting that share of voice that we need, and older women as well. You kind of feel as though you slide off into invisibility. And actually now it's getting a lot of share of voice. But despite brilliant people talking about either HRT or exercise or nutrition or lifestyle, we're kind of forgetting, like you've just said, that as well as the challenges, and I know they can be awful things that we go through, but as well as that, and despite that, and because of those challenges, we're also creating some of the most amazing things in our lives, whether that's actual creation like art, or whether it's this transformation of ourselves and our vision for our life. And I would love to give that more share of voice, as well as the other menopausal issues and topics.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And of course, with my podcast, I've had the blessing of speaking to different people about this topic of perimenopause, menopause, the transition, the gifts that are involved in it. But I would really like to specifically with you chat about this idea of perimenopause and art and creativity. Let's talk through that passion of yours.
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm 49, so it's a lived experience. Let's get, no bones about it. It's definitely a lived experience. Similarly to a lot of us out there, I am, forgetting my own name some days, hurting and aching other days, can't get out of bed some days, and whatever the symptoms are. So for me, I guess my personal experience has been over the last few years of using my own art practice to help hold space for that transformation. And I think I was doing that before I even realized really what was happening. So it was a really natural, gentle, and graceful way to kind of, I was holding space without realizing it. And then I kind of grew into that space. So having an art practice or a crafting or a making practice, or even like playing an instrument or whatever creative outlet you have, it just carves out that time for you to really be you, doesn't it? Throughout the days or the weeks. And we're living such busy lives, and at our ages, in those kind of mid ages, where we're often at the pinnacle of a career, or we've got children that are growing up, and kind of it's quite demanding on your pocket as well as on your emotions, as well as on your time. You've got maybe older parents who are trying, needing extra care and attention, and your community. So many of us have stepped into kind of leading in whatever way that looks like, that we forget that we need that soft quietness and that time to explore, to play, to kind of unfurl a little bit, just to kind of breathe and let ourselves be. And that's where it started for me with the art and the perimenopause world, I guess.
So, two things you said there, the gentle softness and the unfurling. Those are just beautiful ways of expressing this season of life. I do agree. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's the potential that we get to tap into. So we've had all these things that we've done and these gifts and skills and abilities, right? It's not like we're letting that go, but there's almost like, for many of us, a complete transformation in how we would use those gifts, things that maybe have been forgotten that we need to pick back up. And I would like to talk about the gift of creativity in aiding this transformation. So let's talk about how that plays into helping us in our own metamorphosis from that, caterpillar to the butterfly. Let's talk about art that way.
Yeah. Creativity is such a powerful thing at any time of life. And I hear so many people say to me when I'm teaching, oh, I'm not creative at all. And actually, it's a fact. As a species, we are the most creative species on the planet. That's just a fact. That's how we've got to where we are, good or bad. That's how we've got to where we are. So I really believe, and I know you believe this as well, that we are created to create. And, that is a natural thing. But in this kind of fiery crucible time, it's physically fiery as well. There is a gentleness and a softness, but there's also the other side of that, is this creativity born of the spark and born of this kind of inner fire, where we are symbolically, I think, letting go of the things that no longer serve us. Our tolerance level for BS and stuff that we don't want around us kind of drops, and we become more powerful as women, I think. And we literally don't have the tolerance there and the capacity or the bandwidth, because we are hurting, or we are tired, or we are forgetful, or whatever the symptoms are, it reduces our capacity. So I think creativity steps in as this way of kind of re-sparking that inner self in us. And once we start to feel that fire of creativity start to really burn and excite us, I have so many friends who have ditched a corporate job and started a side hustle or their own business, or people that have come back to a craft or a way of making after years of letting it go. And it's because there's this essential sort of creative fire that's happening in us. And for me, that kind of idea of creative self-expression really comes to the front and becomes super, super powerful when you have something bold to say. And my goodness, don't we all have something bold to say at this time of our lives, So what better time than to kind of step into that creative self-expression than now?
Oh, I mean, You're singing my song. This is my theme song, right? It's so incredible. So as you're talking and you're describing this season of life and how we do become more powerful, you know, those archetypes of the maiden, and and you become the crone, right? And I had a
Yes.
conversation with someone about what's between like the mom and the crone, the matron and the crone, like what is that? And we were discussing this, like jump to crone feels very, like you said, almost like you're disappearing. But I was just pondering how all of what you just said, all of that we bring to the table, all of that wisdom, all of that fire is actually, instead of becoming invisible, it's almost elevating us to that place where we can be the wisdom and we can be the light for women coming along behind us that aren't there yet. So maybe
Yes.
crone isn't a lovely word, but I can see as you're talking that everything's leading us to this place. And maybe societally, we don't value it the way in some cultures it is valued. But I see how valuing a woman who's been through that crucible, who's been through the fire of life, plus the fire of menopause, because for some women, it really is a battle to maintain the
Mm.
same level of expectation in our lives and go through all of that at the same time, is quite a testimony of the strength of women.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that crone, like a lot of other words that have become maybe difficult or challenging to people, and people take them and re-own them for themselves. The queer community have done that. I think crone is one of those words of empowerment. And when you look at, I'm very much inspired by myth and folklore. Ancient ritual landscapes forms a massive part of my art practice. And when you look at the deep sort of mythology around crone and hags, they're very powerful and they're very wise and they're very strong characters. And there's an author called Sharon Blackie, who you probably know, a British author who leans into that kind of mythology. And she wrote Haggitude, and that's her book about kind of post-menopausal life, having haggitude, learn to kiss the hag, embrace that, because that's actually a really powerful archetype. And I think there's an archetype that kind of runs through us all as women that doesn't relate to age, because archetypes are not always age related. And I think I keep talking about the creatrix, and the creatrix archetype has a power, has a magic, has a spirituality, has an ability to bring things forward or create things in the world that I think is relevant at any time of life.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think the creatrix is kind of like on steroids. It's really going for it during menopause. The creatrix is the one for me.
I agree wholeheartedly. I can feel that tempo in my own body. I've always been creative and I always have created, but there's almost like a hyperdrive
Yes.
for creativity.
I think there's a need, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
There's a wildness, I think, to creativity and naturalness. And I always talk about people's wild heart. And I think that going through menopause becomes a very wild, raw, natural thing for us. And yes, it's kind of becoming scientificized, that's not a word, medicalized and kind of boxed into medication and treatments and stuff. And that's brilliant because that helps so many women. But there's also a raw wildness and a wild heartedness to it. So I think when we lean into that, there's this kind of getting back to our wild creative selves, but also, and especially for me, and I can only speak from my own experience, there's this real sort of connection to the sort of feminine power of the world and the natural world, which kind of comes back to crone, because very often the crone stereotypes were nature-based wise women in the stories. So yeah, it's all these circles and cycles within cycles. It's really fascinating, isn't it?
Yes, it makes me think of an unfettered existence. Like, and I don't mean that in a selfish way. I think some people have taken some of this and made it more self-centered, but I see it more in terms of service, if that makes any sense. It's like, yes, it's for me. This season of life,
Yes.
the gifts that are in it are for me as well. We've lived a lot of life of service, which I have enjoyed that season of my life. But there is this, as our hormones drop, there is that I'm not tolerating whatever anymore. We do shift, we change, we fundamentally become a little bit, you go through the fog of menopause, but there's a clarity at the end of it. And like you said, we don't have the child at the end or necessarily the business at the end. It's more of a coming of age for ourselves and really understanding how in this season of life we have this better understanding of ourselves, hopefully, and we have this awareness of the heartbeat of what we long to do and be in this season. We do have parents, a lot of us, that we are caring for, and I do have my mom that I do a lot of things for. But even with that, it's like they're still holding that space that you're talking about, that creative space, that's that wild space where we can um, go gently and explore who it is we want to be and how we want to express that in the world. For you and I, it's art, right? That expression comes through
Yeah.
all forms of art. But let's talk about creativity. Let's zoom out a little bit and talk about, because somebody's like, I can't draw, because that's always the first thing that people say. If you say art, they're
Yeah.
like, I can't draw, right? How many times have you
Yeah.
heard that? It's like, well, I didn't say drawing. I said
Oh,
create,
gazillions.
right? So I would love to have you flesh out a little bit this idea of creativity for someone who's thinking, I'm not an artist, I can't draw. So let's play around in that playground of creativity to
Yeah.
really help people think differently about it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because once you get past the barrier of I can't draw, it's like uncorking a fizzy bottle and everything just kind of spurts out of people. I've seen it so many times because you're right, people equate creativity with a creative outlet or a creative output. And creativity with like a capital C is not necessarily the same thing as making a piece of art or being a concert pianist or putting on a play or writing a novel. They're kind of creative outputs. So, like I said before, everybody is wired for creativity. We can imagine what's behind a closed door. We can work out how to make dinner with the scraps left in the fridge. We can put an outfit together last minute when we, get offered to go out somewhere. They're all signs of a creative brain. So for me, I'll often say to people, don't do anything extra. If you don't think you're being creative, don't try all of a sudden to be creative, because that's going to just like put you into a stress mode. It's going to make you think you have to perform and you have to do a thing and it's got to be perfect. Instead, why don't you spend a week with your journal, your phone, your friend, however you like to kind of reflect on your day and your life, just noticing where you're actually already being creative. Because I bet there are so many times during the day where, I don't know, you work out a new formula for that spreadsheet, or you come up with an idea in a meeting, or you do a really gorgeous floral arrangement in your church, or there's so many things that you will think are a task that you're performing. But if you just take a beat and just hold on, you will realize it's actually very creative. So I would urge people to think about creativity as a kind of mental state that we're all naturally good at. That's the first thing. And then secondly, I would say once you've realized how creative you are being already, it's very trite and it's very overdone, but hashtag do it for the process and fall in love with just messing around and giving yourself permission to play and explore things. And don't get hung up on what you're going to produce at the end or even show anybody or even expect it to be amazing. Kind of let go of all the expectations and just play. So yeah, for me, creativity starts with just noticing and leaning into the belief and the knowledge that you are creative. That's the first thing. And then just play, go back to having some fun and expressing yourself. That's everybody is comfortable starting at that point. So if you're listening to this and you feel uncomfortable with creativity, start there and you're going to have a ball. You're going to really enjoy it.
It's really that sense of curiosity, right? Like
Yeah.
I wonder what if, like we do it all the time. Like you said, cooking. How many times have we been like, you have a recipe and you're like, well, I don't have all of these ingredients. but I want to make this recipe, right? So
Yeah,
I'll just substitute this for that, right?
exactly. We're making it up as we go along. Nobody knows. Nobody knows that. I would say the Queen of England, bless her, she's gone now, but I can't quite move on. But nobody knows whether it's the president or the CEO or your parents. Everybody's making it up as they go along. So just remember that, and you'll be fine.
I
And
think
actually, I have a formula for creativity. I'm not a maths person, but I've always kind of tried to reduce complicated concepts into
Mhm.
things that are easy to understand. And I've got a formula which is creativity equals curiosity plus action times repetition, which is
Mm,
very much what you just said. So creativity is, what if this? And then you act on that and try it out. And then you think, do I like it? Do I not? What's the next step? And then you repeat that. So what if I changed it to this? And then you take action and then you repeat it. And literally, that's all creativity is. It's wondering what if, seeing if it works, and then carrying on or changing it and going again. That's that's the process of painting, right? From beginning to end, or writing a novel or any of those things.
mm-hmm. And I think that we get so much out of the creative process. It like untangles sometimes, It's,
Yes.
for example, I love to do jigsaw puzzles. I have one here to my right, which is why I'm pointing that direction. And as I do jigsaw puzzles, I'm thinking about the color, I'm thinking about the shape. And what ends up happening is things fall away from my mind and I can focus on this other thing. And then sometimes my brain is puzzling over something while I'm doing a puzzle. And that creative process of doing a puzzle does wonderful things for my mental health sometimes. Like it's a place to
Yeah.
go to that really has no value in the world, right? You put it together, you take it apart. A puzzle is pretty much just for me, yeah, right? But I think
Yeah.
even that can be something creative because your brain is thinking about solutions. So maybe we could think of creativity also in terms of solutions, right? Like when we're trying to find the
Oh,
answer to
always.
something, isn't that creativity?
Yes, problem solving, looking for alternatives, getting over challenges, bouncing back, resilience.
Mm,
All of those things are creative thinking. And there's a lot of studies out there actually that, purport that boredom is good. Boredom is good for creativity, and boredom, I'm not saying jigsaw puzzles are boring, but I'll do a puzzle in a magazine, or knitting, things that you don't need to kind of really focus on. And for some people that could be mindful painting and drawing, where
mm-hmm,
you're not trying to create a specific thing. It lets your brain rest. If you've given it a
mm-hmm.
problem, and you're desperately thinking of how do I resolve this thing, how do I resolve this thing, that's why a lot of people have great ideas in the shower or when they've gone for a walk, because like you just said, you gift that problem to your subconscious brain, and then you relax and then you play with your conscious brain, and all the time your subconscious is working on that stuff creatively and you just don't know it, and then eureka, boom, you get the idea or you get the fix or the solve or whatever it is. So there's a definite part for kind of hands-on making and hands-on activity as part of that process as well. Whether you want to create a masterpiece or you just want to use it as a mindfulness practice in order to help you with your creativity in your daily life, getting hands-on, doodling. How many of us doodle when we're on Zoom calls and other things? You're always kind of doodling or making, and it's just a way to ease your subconscious mind, I think. So there's so many ways you can use creativity as a tool like that, whether it's like I said, whether it's to create an amazing thing you're going to put in your home and be proud of, or whether it's just something that gets you through your day or transitions you maybe into the weekend, or gets you over that horrible big meeting that you just had and you can kind of let your hair down when you get home. All of these things are really valid, I think.
Mm. As you're talking, I'm hearing behind the scenes of what you're sharing is possibly people feeling the need to perform.
Oh yes.
Is that
And be
pressure?
perfect.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, perform. I will perform and show everybody I'm doing this thing, and I will also do it absolutely brilliantly. And there'll be no way that anybody can judge me. I mean, I can hear myself doing that. On
Mhm.
Instagram, if we shared as much of the stuff that goes wrong, and I do sometimes, but our feeds would not look, and people would not think we were the people we are, because actually we're all in that performance mode. And what I love about art and making is that it doesn't really require anybody to see it. You can if you like, but you don't have to. And I teach quite a number of sketchbook courses in person and online. And what I love about a sketchbook is that you can close it. You could even buy one with a lock on it if you were that desperate to not show it to anyone, and a sketchbook is really personal, or a sketch journal, or a combination, or like a book where you write and collage, or whatever
Mhm,
whatever that
mhm.
looks like for you, is because you can close it. It is private. If you don't want to share that with anybody, you can make as many mistakes in there as you like. You can rip the page out, you can go again. And I think sketchbooks and journals really offer a place of sanctuary for people who are concerned about being perfect and concerned about performing, because it's a private thing. So definitely, if that's you, or if you're having that moment, I often have that moment, and I'll go to my sketchbook and just play around. And then
Mhm.
I'll go back to the canvas, because I've kind of let it out and I've got all my agitation out, and now I can, hone in on what I actually want to paint. So yeah, really useful.
That is such a powerful thought for people to understand, that creativity is for us. It's
Yes.
not for consumption. It's primarily a process that we've been given by design as creatures that can do that. It's an expression. Some people
Yeah.
express it with their frustration, some people express it with joy, but it's a language. Creativity is a language, and I think it is a soul feeding language. And
Oh
what
gosh, yeah. And it's a dance too. It's a
mm,
language, and it's a dance, and it's a movement. And my creativity is not my content. Yes, I
mm,
share my art as content on my social media channels, but it's very reductive, very quickly becomes very reductive if you're
mm,
literally doing it just to put content on social media, or just to keep showing, your loved ones, and they all go, yeah, it's great, it's great. It becomes very self-serving and very reductive. So I agree, absolutely agree with you that creativity is a soul-filling process, or way of being, more than a
mhm,
process. It was actually my word for last year. I have a word every year, and my word for last year was soulful, purposefully spelt with two L's, as in my soul is full, and how do I fill up my soul? And I think that art and creativity just offers such a unique way for people to do that, and particularly for women in this middle of life, where we're in the messy middle, right? We're like the mush inside the caterpillar's chrysalis. We're not still a caterpillar, we're not yet a butterfly. We're kind of disintegrating and rebuilding and going through all that process in the
mhm,
chrysalis. And while we're doing that, what better way than to express all of that in creative ways
mhm,
that don't have to mean anything to anyone else? It's such an outlet. And in the guide that I've put together, there's one of the exercises where it's about self-expression, of your pain and your symptoms and your challenges, which again is scientifically peer reviewed to assist and help you manage things like discomfort and pain by kind of understanding it and befriending it through art and expression. And also how that can help you then explain that to your loved ones or to colleagues. So there are many ways that art can be practical for you, as well as making a picture in a frame. There are
mhm,
many other ways that it can be part of your toolkit to kind of get through and find joy as well. We don't want to just get through,
mhm,
right? We want to find joy in this process.
mm. The joy piece, it's so hard to explain, but it's like it is. I would go so far as to say it's an actual need that we have in this season of perimenopause. This transition, this chrysalis period of our lives, we it's like a mixture of, we need to rest from all of the driving to some degree. We also need to restore because we are, like you said, we're dissolving things and we're growing things, and it's very much a very active season in some kind of undefinable ways. Do you know what I'm trying to express? It's
Yeah.
not all happening out
Yeah.
there where people can see it, but it's our bodies are literally going through this transformation, and sometimes we're confused about it, right? And sometimes we're
Yeah.
frustrated with it or angry with it or whatever, and everybody's having these different experiences, but it's a natural process that all women throughout millennia have gone through. And so there's this beauty to it that maybe in some cultures, maybe in some points in history, it was seen for what it is. And it's this beautiful, like you said, metamorphosis. But I think in order to fully express that, we need to lean in, like you're saying, and allow those things that are popping up, the curiosities that we have, the things that we want to do, and allowing ourselves to almost go back to childhood in a bit, and
Yes.
just try whatever crosses our little minds. You know what I'm saying? Like, and not being so
Yeah.
judgmental on the
The freedom.
outcome. Mm-hmm. Because you mentioned outcome, and I
Yes.
did
Yeah.
want to this. That's where I was, my perimenopausal brain happening right this moment. But it's it's shifting from outcome based living, which we've needed to do and have done for so long. It's turning that idea on its head and saying, I'm doing this just for the soulfulness of it, the joy of it, just because that is restorative to me.
Yes. And that's totally valid and
Mm-hmm.
totally okay. It doesn't have to be, it's kind of a reprogramming, because I
Mm-hmm.
think we've all had such a huge list of responsible tasks to keep doing repetitively every moment of every day of our lives, whether we're parents or whether we're workers or whatever we've been doing, that coming at art and creativity now is kind of relearning that program to understand, like you said, it's not a task just to tick off and to do. It's actually a relearning, and like I've said, an unfurling or a reblooming. There's something
Mm-hmm.
in that um, which is powerful in its gentleness. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm coming at with using art to relieve and ease symptoms and find joy, and kind of reimagine your vision for your second half of life and kind of find yourself again. I'm not saying that if you're in the absolute clutches of terrible, terrible physical and emotional menopausal symptoms, that that's the right thing to turn to, because, there's medication, and you kind of need help and attention to come down out of the tree. You've climbed up into this crazy tree because, there's so much going on for you. But when you're ready and you get to that point where maybe you're exploring your symptoms, or you've got some of it under control, or you're starting to have enough bandwidth and capacity to think, what else is there? What more can there be to this process? That's the golden moment, I think, where you can start to lean into your natural creativity and start to look to inspirations and to different ways of creating as an outlet. So even if you're listening to this and you're kind of like, oh my god, I am so in like the craziness and the mayhem that I couldn't even consider picking up stitches or a sketchbook or a camera, don't panic, don't worry, because there will be that moment, and it's always there for you to pick it up. So see it as like this beautiful creative hug waiting to happen. Whenever you're ready for it, it's going to be there ready for you.
Mm-hmm. And I think you will be more ready as well. Do you know what I mean? Because this metamorphosis that we're talking about, it does seem to be driving women toward creativity. It's fascinating to me how that, like, okay, community always comes up, like how important it is to have your good community, and this rest, learning to rest during this season of life and allowing our bodies to do whatever they need to do, and leaning into that season and not seeing it as a weakness, but understanding this process is doing something in us and for us. And then that creativity piece, so many women are finding that, whether it's gardening, cooking,
Yeah.
making sourdough bread, decorating their houses, whatever it is, there's that drive. I'm seeing it, like you're identifying how creative this season is, and I'm talking to women and finding that they're if they've never technically been creative, okay, in the formal sense that we all want to define
Yeah.
creativity. Can you draw? Can you paint? But there's like a heartbeat of creativity that's rising in women that you're identifying. And I think it's really exciting.
Oh my gosh, I just love that. That was so poetic, Gina. There's a heartbeat of creativity rising in women. I'm trying to remember that. I will use that as a quote. I love that. And yeah, and I also think off the back of the pandemic, I know it's been 4 years now. Gosh, that's gone so quickly. But I think
The
off the back
invisible
of the
years.
isolation, yeah, the back of the isolation, the challenges, the health issues, the kind of panic and the time to do nothing. I think that's also, helped just raise creativity and enjoyment of creative hobbies massively. I think, I don't know the numbers, but it was absolutely crazy. Like Hobbycraft, the super chain of hobby stores, like reported some 400 or 600% increase over COVID. So you saw people kind of making that sourdough loaf as well as doing the little 5-minute workout online, but it was kind of like everybody was like, what can I do? Things to do. So I think there's definitely more awareness of different things that are out there. I think women are maybe more confident to go, do you know what, I'd love to try a pot throwing class, or I'd love to go to the garden centre and learn more about growing fruit, or whatever those things are. So I think there's definite confidence and availability of creativity that's now kind of merging, like you said, with that heartbeat that's rising. There's a need and a desire to do it, but there's also an availability of it in the world. So I just think that's like the perfect complement, isn't it, of like perfect mix for magic to happen.
It really is. And I think tapping into the magic of it, not the expectation of it, is key as well.
Yeah, and no matter what your beliefs are, whether you're religious or not religious, or whatever you think about the world, there is a definite sort of spirituality to making that I also see that as a big trend in my group and network of women of my age group. I'm seeing people be more creative. I'm seeing people want to be more free. I'm seeing people want to tap into mission, service, and authenticity. And then I'm also seeing this kind of spiritual reawakening in a lot of people. And those 3 or 4, I can't remember how many I've just said, but those 3 or 4 big themes like are really common amongst our age group. And I think it's because we know that there's going to be room for us. I can't think of a better way to describe it, but kind of like I said earlier in the conversation, after this metamorphosis, there isn't like a baby or a husband at the end of it necessarily. I mean, hopefully there are still, even my 18-year-old is still my baby. But what I mean is that we'll come out of it kind of for ourselves and independent for ourselves. So I think, there's a definite trend towards that more spiritually rewarding side of creating and making, whether that's on purpose for a specific belief set or just that flow state that we find ourselves in, that wellness, that coming back to the now. I think that's a really powerful tool as well of creativity and making. And that's my word for this year, by the way, now. So yes.
What is it?
I'm leaning into now as much as possible. Now. Yeah.
I love these conversations, and I hope that listeners are really contemplating, looking for those silver linings in this season of life. Like, in what ways are we shedding? Because I think we definitely are. To your analogy of the chrysalis, there are some things melting away. I feel like it's a real season of sifting, It's like our bodies are being sifted, our emotions are being sifted, even our lives in some ways are being sifted. And I think there's kind of like a need for that pause. I think the perimenopause, menopause, I think that word pause is so key. It's like our butt when we went from puberty to menopause, puberty to having a cycle. Now we're going from cycle back to not having one. So our body's essentially been through this process. Now we're just doing it in reverse. And it is a pause to some degree. There's a certain capacity that we've always been able to manage that feels like it's harder to manage now. And instead of seeing it negatively, how can we look at it and say, okay, that's, you used the concept of holding space and making space in our life. I feel like the pause part of perimenopause and menopause is that space. And we've been going at such a pace, it's hard to slow down.
Yes.
But to be creative, right? That slowing
that's
down
that
is
relearning. Yeah. And I find that incredibly difficult to slow down. And even today I went to a gallery about an hour away to drop off a painting for an exhibition, and then I came back and I knew I was speaking to you in a few hours later, and I was kind of just walking around the house and like, what should I do? I don't know what to, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I don't know. I don't know what to do. And then I said to my husband, I feel like I'm wasting this time in between. I'm just sat here doing nothing. And he went, but you are doing something, because you're recharging as you're doing what you consider to be nothing. You clearly need that, because otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. So you are doing something. Doing nothing can be doing something. Pausing can be active. For those of us who require this, I don't know, this way of looking at things as productive or efficient or whatever, there is a productivity in not producing, which I know sounds absolutely crazy, but you can't drive your car without servicing it, or without kind of letting the engine cool down and not overheat. So it's exactly the same thing, isn't it? It's kind of that restorative thing that you were talking about. So yeah, the pause is important. And we can pause, and art and creativity can be restful. They can be gentle. You don't have to be flinging paint on a massive canvas. You can take a little sketchbook and a pencil up to bed and doodle things and write things. It can be very gentle. So I think the pause can be a variety of pauses too.
It's a reframe, isn't it? It really is a reframe of the life that we've lived. And what does this season require of me? And what does it not require of me? And I think the creativity that you're talking about, Kelly, is a vehicle to help us work through all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Who am I really? And without trying to explain that to somebody, if you don't know yourself, by going through a creative making process, you're exploring, who am I really? From the colors you might choose, to the subject material, to what you might say, to how you might make a mark. All of these things are who you are really. And that's what we're exploring. And I think knowing that and physically experiencing it by creating things makes you more knowledgeable and experienced of yourself. It's kind of, when you say something, is very different to kind of knowing it in your bones. I don't know if that's an American thing, but it's a very Northern English thing, like knowing it in your bones. And I think by the act of creating, it helps you know in your bones, in yourself, who you are. And that, I think, is something not to be sniffed at in this stage. Yes, we're still going to be confused. No, art probably won't give you all the answers, but goodness, what a tool, what a powerful tool it is to help navigate. It's definitely something worth playing with and seeing where it takes you.
I have so many thoughts in my head right now. The productivity and the pause, that's a powerful thought. The soulfulness of creativity, the beauty of the transformation we're going through, and reflecting on what needs to be left behind. It has served its purpose and it's a beautiful thing, but we don't have to carry everything forward. And I think if I could just express my own joy of creating, it's a bit like finding joy in the way a paint moves or a color makes me feel, right? And so briefly, I want to touch on, the people on video will be able to see your style of landscape art behind you. And one of the things
Yep.
that attracted me to your art originally was that wildness that you have in your style. It's the best way I know how to express it for myself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's an abandon to your artistic style. And we talked briefly before we started the actual podcast that people are drawn to you because they want to paint like you, right? They want to have that same wild abandon, and they want to be able to abstract a landscape or loosen it up or whatever. And that's a
Yeah.
wonderful thing to explore and to be creative about. But I think greater than that is using that as a jumping off point for finding what about that art is speaking to you, and how you can find a way to express it in a way that's your own voice and your own expression of it. Because I think as people learn to paint, it's the first thing we do is imitate the people we admire, right?
Sure.
But the goal in this creativity that you and I are talking about is to get to a place where it becomes an expression of who you are and where you're at, and it will evolve, right, as you
Yes,
utilize it.
absolutely.
It doesn't stay the
Yeah, and
status.
no, it won't ever stay the same. Even, the really famous masters, they have different periods and different styles of work across their careers, their painting careers. And for me, I guess the wildness of my work is anchored in the places that I choose to paint. So as I've said to you, I'm always in like the Celtic West of the UK. So that's, for the overseas listeners, that'd be like Wales, Cornwall, Scotland, Ireland, all of those regions to the west. And I am kind of drawn by wild, empty spaces and kind of dramatic scenes. And I think it goes back to my heritage, growing up on the traveling fair and always wondering what's over the next hill. I walk a lot, I hike a lot, I camp, I go out and about and I experience all the weathers. I very rarely paint places that I haven't stood in and felt. So I'm always very rooted and grounded in that sense of place. But it's not because I'm just mentally choosing that for myself. It's because it's a part of my character and a part of my heritage and a part of what lights me up and makes magic inside me. So that will be very different for every person listening. Even if we painted the same scene, we would both paint it incredibly different.
Mm-hmm.
And in my work, I like to let things dribble, and I use inks, and then I'll use really big brushes and a big bold square mark on the top, and then I'll use my fingers a lot. And I'm always painting pathways and song lines, if you like. I don't know if you're aware of song lines, but kind of ancient roots. And I find that even if there's no path or anything in my painting, I'll draw dribbly lines that feel like paths and sort of ways into the painting. So there's always something in the creativity that you express that is intrinsically you and cannot be copied, even if it was almost an exact replica.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel with the abandon, with the wildness, with the bold color choices and the expressive style, that, yeah, I am seen as quite a confident, sociable, outgoing person. But then I also feel more confident because I paint confidently. So you get a lovely feedback loop from your personality and your heart and soul informing your creativity and your artwork. But then also your artwork helps elevate and inform your heart and soul and who you are. And it's just this wonderful upward spiraling loop of like elevation when you really get into that harmony with what you're creating. So yeah, for me, I think I love wild and abandoned. I love that description. I'll take that any day of the week. I love it. Thank you. It's great.
That's exactly why I was like, this artist, oh, I love her art so much. And that was a while back. But I would love to have you share maybe 3 key takeaways. What are 3 things you would like people to think about or consider in terms of incorporating creativity in this season of life?
I would say, first of all, you deserve it. And that can be a really hard thing to accept, service to ourselves or kindness to ourselves. So the first thing would be you deserve this time to be creative. You deserve to have time, whether that's every day or every weekend or whatever that looks like for you. You deserve that time to and I will use waste because it's frivolous on purpose. You deserve that time to waste it or spend it however you choose, and that's okay. So first of all, accept the gift, because we all find it really easy to gift to other people and not for ourselves. So that would be my first thing, is kind of, yeah, you deserve the time. The second is allow yourself to play. And just because we're over 40, over 50, over 60, who cares? We're still those little girls inside. And you talked about it earlier. We've got kind of this reverting to the freedom of childhood. And it's like, be curious, splash around, use your fingers, choose a color just because you love it. Who cares if it's not on trend? Give yourself that permission to play and be little Gina, be little Kelly. Just go for it. That would be my second point. And then my third point is very much what we've already talked about, but I think it's so important to bring it back, is do it for yourself. And if something beautiful comes of it that you're so proud of that you want to put in a gallery, amazing. If something comes of it that's so ugly but you love the process, amazing. If something comes of it that's kind of okay and you're going to learn and do it again, amazing. Like, it really doesn't matter. Just do it for yourself. So yeah, feel as though you deserve the time. Play and go back to childhood expression and let your inner child out, and then do it for yourself rather than doing it for that final perfect moment. Those would be my three key things.
Wow. I love those so much. Kelly, how can people find you? Where are you and what are your handles?
Well, you can often find me walking in the Peak District. So if you're a Derbyshire loving hiker, you'll often see me there. But I don't think most of your listeners are going to do that. So yeah, come and find me. My website is just my name. So it's kellyherrick.com. And you can find me on the social media channels are all the same. It's at Kelly Herrick Art. So come and find me. I love to chat and be in community with people. I'm very approachable, and yeah, I love to find new people. So come and say hi. And if you want the guide that I've mentioned and this practical download, it's totally free. And you're going through perimenopause or menopause, I've created, for those on screen, I've got a copy here. I've created the Meno Relief Toolkit. It's a creative practice. It's a guide, and you can get that at kellyherrick.com on my homepage. And basically, it's got some brilliant symptoms checklist, and then it's got all of these amazing sort of art and making activities for each of those symptom types. So go and get a copy of that and put it in the hands of as many women as we can, because why not? Let's tool everybody up as much as we can.
It's like a modern renaissance. That's what we're creating.
Yes.
Yeah.
A menaissance. Oh, that was so bad. That was so bad.
That was the creative spark in that moment. That was fantastic.
I know. You can have that one. I'll let you use that.
Well, Kelly, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today and just for sharing your perspective. It's so enriching to have other women, for me, other artists as well, to speak into this sphere of creativity and perimenopause and just having a different take on it. And the way that you're passionate about it, the connection that you bring to it, and you're very approachable in your art. Thank you so much for what you do in the world and for making this connection between menopause and creativity, because you're so on point. And I think what you're doing, it can change the world. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's been a joy and an absolute pleasure.
Fantastic. Friends, today, if you find us on YouTube, just look down below. I'll have the links to Kelly there. But if you want to head to my website, you can go to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 366, and I will have the links there. This is one of those conversations that we want to keep stirring the pot of women in midlife finding their voice in creativity, whatever that looks like for you. This is such a creative season. That pulse keeps rising in the women that I talk to. And I want to encourage you to hold a space for something, anything, doesn't matter what it is. Just get curious. Like Kelly said, go back to your childhood sense of play and curiosity. Don't judge it. Don't worry about showing it to anybody. Don't worry about the outcome. It really is the creative process that we need to experience to grow as women and to make this transition in a way more rich We find ourselves at the end of that creative process. It's the best way I know how to express it. It's so important for our mental, emotional, and soul health to find a way to create in this season of life. So reach out for that free resource from Kelly. It'll be in the links, so don't worry about it. I've got you. And I look forward to sharing more inspirational people and stories and strategies with you in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.